Welcome to the Stewardship Leader podcast, brought to you by the Christian Stewardship Network. CSN exists to encourage, teach, and connect church and stewardship leaders to help them create and lead healthy stewardship ministries in their church. You can learn more about CSN at ChristianStewardshipNetwork.com. Well, hey everybody, welcome to Stewardship Leader. I'm your host, Leo Sabo, and today I have Matt Bell with us one more time talking about how to teach kids about money. And we're talking about his book, Trusted, Preparing Your Kids for a Lifetime of God-Honoring Money Management. And in the last episode, we talked about some of the dangers of today's marketing messages and how it affects our kids, and then how we can help our kids navigate those messages, because they are going to be influenced by them. So we need to know as parents, how do we help overcome some of that marketing that leads them to think about money a certain way and maybe even spend money a certain way. We also talked about ways to raise our kids to be diligent earners. Today, we want to talk about how do we help them to become good planners, talk about generosity and other topics that are part of Matt's repertoire of wisdom that he has for us. So Matt, welcome again to Stewardship Leader. So appreciate your time that you're devoting to us to teach us about this topic.
Thanks so much, Leo. Looking forward to continuing the conversation.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive right in. At what age do you recommend beginning to teach kids about biblical generosity? And what are some of the most important lessons, especially early lessons, that we can teach them?
Yeah, there's a lot there. The time to get started is the minute they have any money rolling into their life. We want that to be kind of an expectation established early, followed quickly, really simultaneously with some teaching about that. But, we talked about some roles that parents play last time around. We talked about the gatekeeper, the teacher, the role model. Part of the gatekeeper, I don't want to be harsh about this, but we're just conveying to our kids from that young age when they first have some money coming in that, hey, this is how we do life as a family. This is how we operate. We live generously. And so the first portion of everything we receive, we're giving back to the Lord for his work in the world. So it's kind of setting that expectation and that example early, but then quickly followed by teaching about why that is. Why is it that we give some of the resources that we're blessed with? I mean, during the writing of the book, I met with some 20-something-year-old young men, and all of them have been raised in Christian homes. All of them saw their parents giving. None of them really understood why. So it's really important from that get-go. We're getting our kids started with generosity. We're teaching them why, that, hey, this is an act of worship. This is a way of saying thank you to God because he provides everything that we have, the comfortable bed we sleep in every night, the roof over our heads, the food that we enjoy every day. God is our provider. This is a way of acknowledging that truth and of thanking him. And then we're showing kids from an early age some of the many needs in the world and what a joy it is to be able to come alongside God and his life-changing, eternity-shaping work in the world by participating, by helping to provide resources for some of the work that's addressing some of those needs. So it's that early expectation followed closely with some early teaching about the biblical basis for why it is that we live generously.
It's such an interesting thing that you just shared about meeting with these 20-something-year-olds and having them witness their parents giving, but yet not understanding the why and why they give. And I just think about what a missed opportunity for parents to really share what you just shared, which is the fact that what we have isn't something that we've necessarily earned. Yes, we earn an income, but especially early on when you're a kid, you haven't earned anything. You're just living by the grace of your parents. And then, of course, understanding and passing on this truth that everything we have is given to us, right? Even the breath we breathe and the talent and the abilities we have come from God. And so it is a missed opportunity when we don't help our kids to understand why we do what we do. I grew up in a generation where parents didn't talk about money. I remember our parents thought about money, so we knew that there was issues, but we didn't know what our parents earned. We had no idea how they were managing it. We just saw the blow-ups whenever they would happen when money was short. And it was a wrong way for us to get a perspective on money, because what impression it made on me is that money can be contentious. When you spend too much, there's going to be, your spouse is not going to be happy. And so I just kind of walked away with money could be a point of contention in your marriage. And when my wife and I began to have that, it took me right back to my childhood and how I felt when I watched my parents fight. And I didn't want that. I wanted to push that as far away from our life as possible. And it was the one thing that motivated me to figure this money thing out, because I didn't want to fight with Natalie about money. But yet it was inevitable. We were going to fight about money because money was tight. We didn't know how to manage it. We were both selfish in our own ways. And yet that's what motivated us to actually teach our kids about money, because we didn't want them to repeat that as well. So it's so important that we pass on these things, that we don't keep them to ourselves. And you said this in the previous episode, that parents feel inadequate sometimes on teaching this. But the reality is that we are more than equipped to do it if we just focus on understanding that the very things that we struggle with, they will struggle with. And if we understand how to manage money well, we can't keep that as a secret. It sounds like these parents of these 20-some-year-olds were generous. They were giving on a regular basis, but yet they kept it to themselves, which I do not understand.
Yeah.
I think in the book, you also talk about cultivating a lifestyle of generosity. And I think this kind of goes along with what we're saying here. If we're going to do that, what does it look like? And why is it important, especially to pass it on to our kids?
Yeah. And just one other quick comment about those 20-something guys. You're right. I mean, it is surprising. I mean, being a role model is one of the most powerful ways to teach our kids. So the parents were role modeling it, but there was something that these guys, at least one guy told me, he said it felt like they were checking a box. And no parent wants to hear that. That's not the heart of generosity. And it probably isn't even the heart of those parents, because they were giving faithfully and regularly, but there was something missing in teaching the why and in demonstrating perhaps the joy that they derived in giving. So that's really really important. But this topic of lifestyle generosity, I think, is a very exciting one, because now it takes generosity out of the realm of, okay, we're going to do our tithes and offerings and that sort of thing. Now it's a much bigger idea. And I heard this from multiple parents that talked about the importance of this. And that might take the form of, hey, as part of the way that we roll as a family, if there's another family we know of that's hurting, we're going to make a meal. And it isn't just mom or dad that are going to make the meal. It's the family. We're going to do this joyfully. We're going to do it as kind of a fun family exercise on a Sunday afternoon. And we're going to then together bring this meal to this family. It's just part of how we roll as a family. I heard another example from my friends Dick and Sybil Towner. Dick is a longtime mentor and friend, and Sybil has had a wonderful influence on our family. And I remember them telling us that when they were raising their kids in the Cincinnati area, there was a bus stop kind of close to where they lived that served a fairly poor community. And Dick and his sons noticed that bus stop was not well cared for. The grass would get overgrown, there'd be trash. They adopted the bus stop. They mowed the lawn. The city should have been doing it, but they mowed the lawn. They picked up the trash. They weren't in it for thanks or hoping that the Cincinnati Enquirer would take notice or something. That's just how they rolled. They just lived this lifestyle of generosity. And Sybil talked about how the kids, they wanted to teach their kids to warmly welcome people into their home, to write thank you notes to people quickly, to write notes of encouragement to people that are hurting, to always have something to share at the dinner table. As part of your lifestyle of generosity, you're going to not just be there to listen and to eat, you're going to be there to contribute to the conversation. These are all elements of this lifestyle of generosity.
Yeah. Love it. And I do love Dick Towner. He is someone that I could reach out to as soon as I came into the ministry of stewardship and generosity.
Yeah.
And he was such a role model for everyone that has, gone on that same path. So appreciate him. Of course, I have never met his wife, but it sounds like she's wonderful as well.
When you know Dick, you get the pleasure. Hopefully this will be true for you, of one day meeting Sybil, because you'll see they are just a very powerful, very wonderful couple.
Yeah. Awesome. So switching gears a little bit from generosity to saving, in the chapter on teaching kids to save a portion of all they receive, you have a quote from Dr. Edward Hallowell, author of The Childhood Root of Adult Happiness. He said, "Good parents often do too much for their children. This is their one great mistake." So how does that relate to teaching kids about saving?
I love that quote. That's a motivating quote to me, and I think probably for all parents, because we can all relate. There's this tendency to want to do things for our kids, and sometimes we can take it too far. And so when it comes to savings, it could be about simply buying the things that our kids want. And of course, we do that a lot, right? We do that for birthdays and Christmas and other times just because. But But if we're always buying everything our kids want, that's not so good. And
Mm.
so I think as kids start to get older, to really put it on them to save up diligently over time for things they want. They want a skateboard. Great. We're going to have to save up for multiple weeks in order to get that skateboard. There's a great sense of accomplishment in doing that. There's a development of this kind of delayed gratification. We're not going to spend the money now that we could spend because we're going to save it for this greater reward later. There's just so many benefits to cultivating the habit of saving patiently over time within our kids. But one barrier to that would be our tendency to maybe do too much for our kids. So it's okay to require more and more of them over time.
Yeah, that's good. So you briefly kind of reflected on the idea of delayed gratification, right? That we need to help our kids understand that when they want something, saving for it, delaying that gratification, it actually is a very important character trait that we need to foster and help our kids to embrace. So why is that trait so important?
It's amazing the research that's been done on that topic. There's this classic study. Maybe some of the listeners will be familiar with this. It's come to be known as the marshmallow experiment, and it was done back in the '60s at Stanford University, where they sent these 4-year-olds one at a time into a room with a researcher. They gave them their choice of treats, including a marshmallow, and the deal was they could have one right now, no questions asked, just have at it. Or if you could wait, the researcher said he had to run a quick errand, wait till they come back, then you could have two. And lots of kids, they couldn't even wait till the researcher was out of the room before they gobbled up that treat. But about 30% could wait what turned out to be about 20 minutes, which is a long time for a 4-year-old. For that, for the researcher, right, for the researcher to return, and then they got the two treats. And so what was interesting about the study is that they kept following these kids. So into their teenage years, they followed up with these kids, and they saw some very clear distinctions between the kids that at age 4 could wait and those that couldn't. Kids were doing better in their SAT tests. They were better able to maintain friendships. They had numerous remarkable different traits in a very positive way. And then they followed these kids into early adulthood, and they saw that the kids that could wait back at age 4 tended to have better health habits. They were, again, maintaining friendships for a longer period of time. They had a number of traits that were noticeably different, noticeably better than the kids that couldn't wait. And so this whole idea of delayed gratification, I mean, really, if you think about it spiritually, the hope of heaven is the ultimate in delayed gratification, that we realize our greatest satisfaction will not be here. But that's a little lofty for a 4-year-old, but it is true. So, by encouraging our kids to wait, to save for a better reward, you could buy the stickers now, the candy now, or you could wait over time and get the skateboard. That's not just about a skateboard. That's about developing this very beneficial character trait of delayed gratification.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Matt. Can all kids learn delayed gratification? And if so, how can we as parents help?
That's a great question, because I think it's a natural tendency for parents to say, well, some kids are born with that ability and some are not. Right. And the head researcher, he addressed that, and he said that, yes, maybe some kids have a little bit of a predisposition toward it, but all kids can learn. And there are certain things that we as parents can do to foster that. We can develop waiting rituals in our household, where certain ways that we just operate our family. So when we're seated for dinner, nobody eats until we've given thanks. When Christmas is coming, we set up certain structures around that, so that the gifts are opened on Christmas morning. These are like waiting rituals that kind of build waiting into the rhythms of family life. And then there are certain things that the researcher also mentioned, that the head researcher, Walter Mischel, he talked about if you can cool it, as he said. So that means take the temptation away from kids. So maybe that means not taking the kid to the store as often as we might have otherwise, where they're tempted by all these things that they see. And then there's this idea of time shifting, where we're thinking about the future. There's a great blogger that I quote in the book who talked about referring to her kids or using this phrase of think about future you. I think the kids have been out playing in the snow and they just kind of threw their wet clothes here and there. And she said, no, wait a minute. Let's think of future us. Let's think about when we want to go back out and play again. Let's hang up our clothes so that they're dry. Let's put our boots away in proper place so we know where they are. We're not frustrated later. And so that idea of think of future you, that's a phrase we can use with our kids when they're tempted to spend it all right now. think of future you and that goal that you're saving for that's really important to you.
Yeah, so important. So in your chapter about investing, switching a little bit from saving to investing, you mentioned a money mantra that you've used with kids that relates to this topic. What is that?
Yeah, I like using certain phrases that I repeat often enough that hopefully it's not obnoxious, but hopefully it's often enough that the messages stick. And so when it comes to investing, the phrase I like is, why just buy what all the other kids buy when you could buy the companies that make what all the other kids buy? That's a crazy idea, right? So if you like a certain product, if it's a publicly held company, let's say you like Apple iPhones or computers, you could be a part owner of Apple. That's a wild thought. And that introduces this idea of investing in stocks with kids that, hey, for a very small amount of money. In fact, Leo, today, as you I'm sure know, it's never been easier or less expensive to get started with investing. Today, you could buy for $1. You could buy a fractional share of a publicly traded company, or even better, of an exchange-traded fund or a mutual fund. I like the diversification of funds more than individual stocks for $1 and no commission. That's crazy. So today, there's really no excuse to not have our kids get in the game with investing. And that whole idea of ownership is one that we can plant early in their lives.
Yeah. So why is it important, especially for kids? I mean, I know that sometimes in a parent's mind, they're like, I've got too many things to try to teach them. Investing is something that they'll do later on when they get a job and maybe get out of college. But why is it important to teach our kids, especially the younger, how to begin in thinking about investing and eventually taking that leap in investing?
Because kids have an invaluable resource. They have a resource that lots of wealthy people wish they had more of, and that, of course, is time. And time is a critically important ingredient for investing. I mean, if you take a certain sum of money and invest it at a reasonable expected rate of return, it's time that will multiply that money incredibly through compounding. There's some examples in the book that show just what an incredible power compounding is. So if we teach that to our kids early and show them, man, if you get even a relatively small sum of money going with an investment, it's very likely true that by the time you're ready to retire, again, a crazy abstract concept for a kid, but if somehow you can convey that to the kid, you could very likely, even by the time you graduate high school, be better prepared for your later years than most people after working for an entire lifetime. And so kids have this incredible resource of time. If we can get them using that productively by setting aside a portion for investing, that will serve them really, really well.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that it's easier today and less expensive to invest. Why don't you talk about how it's become easier than ever to teach kids how to invest?
Yeah, well, and I want them to be hands-on with it. And so for the parent, it would be about opening a custodial account for them. Kids can't have an account in their own name until they're 18. But a custodial account, the money is legally theirs, but you're the custodian. You're the one that's responsible. You're giving oversight and teaching to the kid as they manage that account. So open up a custodial account for the kid. You can talk about stocks. I think stocks are relatively easy for kids to understand if you explain it's partial ownership of this company. They're selling a portion of the company to the public to raise money. But then I also like, and I really do think kids can understand ideas, even seemingly complicated ideas, at a younger age than we might imagine. But if we teach them the biblical principle of diversification, that can kind of take us into this realm of mutual funds, how a fund that, again, you could invest in for as little as $1 is really a collection of multiple companies. So you've got that instant diversification benefit of using a fund, but then get them started. And you can show them, if you do the fund right, you can show them, hey, this fund owns these companies that you recognize. So you're a part owner of all these different companies.
This episode of the Stewardship Leader podcast is sponsored by Generous Giving. We help host conversations about God and money in a neutral environment that never asks you for donations. These gatherings have led thousands to experience renewed purpose, stronger families, passionate marriages, and deeper relationships with God. To learn more about hosting a generosity retreat with members of your church, go to generousgiving.org.
One of the many benefits of this is I want kids to experience the ups and downs of the market while they're still under our roof. I want them to experience the kind of felt pain of seeing a decrease in value because the market went down. I want them to understand the market moves through cycles so that they're not scared by that later on. They're kind of used to the fact that it's moving in these cycles. That's normal. That's to be expected. That comes with the territory of investing. It's just one of the many really invaluable lessons that I think they should learn and would really benefit from learning while they're still at home with us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's such an important aspect that kids get on and understand early, because like you said, it's really the benefit of time that's going to help them to really maximize that investment. If they start too late, they miss out. And it can be, I think, intimidating for a parent to focus on something like that or talk about investing when maybe they themselves don't feel like they're doing a good job. Most people feel like they certainly could do better in investing, and we don't know the future. So regardless of how we invest, it's not something that anyone really controls. But it is something that has proven over and over again that if we focus on it, if we are diligent to continue to do it and don't allow our emotions to drive those decisions, but we practice that delayed gratification, understand that in the long run, this will work out. Those are the kind of lessons that are so important for our kids to learn early on. So I appreciate that you focus on that, even though it may seem like that's a topic it's for later. I do believe that the sooner our kids grasp these ideas, the more beneficial it will be for them, not only in investing, but also I think in spending decisions and borrowing and debt and all of that. So let's switch a little bit to talking about making wise spending decisions. How do we talk to our kids about that? How do we help them to begin to understand making wise spending decisions?
Well, we think about some of the principles that would be important for them to know when it comes to making wise spending decisions. And so these are things like making trade-offs. In the real world, we all have to make trade-offs. We have to decide what's more important to us. In their case, it might be, is one pair of designer jeans worth that extra price, or would you rather have two pair of not so designer jeans? That's a trade-off. That's the real world. Looking at value versus cost. Sometimes in stewardship circles, we might think obsessive frugality is kind of the route, but actually sometimes it pays to buy a better quality item that's going to last longer. So that's another lesson to teach our kids. And then comparison shopping. So these days it's so easy with the phone to be able to scan in a barcode and see if there are better prices for the same product at a nearby store. But I'll tell you, Leo, one of the absolute best ideas I learned from Mary Hunt, from her book, Raising Financially Confident Kids. I talked with Mary in working on this book, and in going through her resource, she has this great idea that might not sound all that revolutionary, but I'm telling you, it is. And that is that as kids get older, we give them responsibility for more and more of their spending categories. So if we'd been spending $30 a month on clothing for each of our kids, now at a certain age, 9, 10, not too early, we're giving them the $30 per month with the responsibility to spend that money wisely. I'll tell you, the first time I did that with our kids, I took our two youngest, our daughter and our son, to a clothing store. I think Annika was 9 and Andrew was 11, I believe. And it was fascinating to watch them because, they bought clothing with us before, but it was mom and dad, yes, managing a budget for that $30 a month, but it was still not super tangible to them. And now with $30 cash in hand, they were making decisions differently. They were checking prices more carefully. They were seeing what they could get for their money. And when they went up to that cashier and they handed their cash and they got their change back and they were counting their change to make sure it was correct, I'm telling you, this might sound crazy, but I had tears in my eyes because I saw them making decisions differently. I saw that funnel that we talked about last time opening up. I saw them gaining more responsibility, more ability to make good decisions on their own. And it was a very moving experience. I talked with another couple for this book, and they did this with their daughter with so many categories. It was clothing in the beginning, then it was entertainment, then it was personal care items like makeup and things like that. And every year on her birthday, they gave her a new category, and it became this great thing that she anticipated every year. Which category is going to be this year? And I'll tell you, she learned how to manage money really, really well because it was so hands-on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those practical tools and the consistent adding to their knowledge and ability, we need to really take the advantage of teaching them in making those good spending decisions. And I love what you just shared, that watching them making these decisions, what you were noticing, it wasn't the fact that they were spending money on specific things. is what they were processing through and how that was going to help them in the long term to become good at managing money and making wise decisions. So I love that. That's such a picture of what all of us as parents want.
Yeah, that's right. And to your point, Leo, that here we are, we're having a whole conversation about money, and we don't want to convey that this is some 24/7 new job. Our parents are busy. This is a busy season of life raising kids. This is not about layering on a lot of additional things to do. Oftentimes, this is about simply talking with our kids as we're moving through life. We're in the grocery store, we're making decisions. We're just simply taking a minute to show our kids, oh, here on the shelf tag, it tells you the price per count or the price per ounce, and we can kind of compare products based on that. It's just bringing kids into the conversation within the rhythms of daily life.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's very well put, Matt. It's not something that we have to do that's going to be a huge chore. It's something we do as we engage with them on a day-to-day basis. It's not something that we're going to be like, today is Wednesday, I have to teach them about money. As parents, I think it's instinctive that you use every teachable moment to help your kids embrace a new way of thinking or some other concept they don't yet understand that you wish for them to embrace. And I think that's what really, especially when it comes to spending money, I think that is the long game, right? Because the world is constantly pulling us in different directions. It doesn't matter how old you are, you're going to see things you want. A kid wants a toy, an adult just wants a bigger toy, right? So the challenge never stops. The pressure to spend or to live to a certain lifestyle or whatever, to fit in, that's always there. But to equip our kids with this idea of spending money wisely, it's so much more than just money decisions. It's actually, that's probably the smallest part of the decision is the money. It's everything that comes before the decision that's so important that we're trying to instill into them.
Yeah, that's so true. We're using money all the time. And in this area of spending, spending is what we do arguably most often. That's the financial activity we do most often. So there are so many opportunities to just talk about what we're doing. We're taking our car in for an oil change and tire rotation. A lot of times we could just go do that. They don't even see that we've done that because we did it early in the morning or on the weekend or something like that. But if we'll just take a minute to say, hey, this is, everything belongs to God, and I'm going to take care of this item. I would like the car to last. That's one way that cars, that the math on a car tends to work. We tend to keep our vehicles a long time. If you just do the basic maintenance, tire rotation, oil change, those sorts of things, that's going to help us get as much life out of that car as possible. So it's really just a matter of bringing kids into the conversation.
Yeah, so true. Well, Matt, there's one more topic I want to touch on before I let you go today, and that is on this principle of debt, borrowing, because this is going to be a reality in our kids' lives, just as it is in ours. A topic that debt has become kind of a normal thing in society. It's just something that everyone does, and it's not that big of a deal anymore, but it still is. So I'd love for you to talk about how in your chapter about that you were talking about, you made some recommendations regarding paying for college. Talk about that, because I think it's just understood that nowadays taking on a student loan is just what you have to do. There's no other way. I would love for you to talk about that and speak to parents about paying for college and the idea of borrowing and all of that.
Sure. Yeah. And first of all, not every kid really should go to college. That's a conversation too, even before you get to the how to pay for college conversation, because there are a lot of different pathways that are available to kids that maybe college is not really the right path for them. So that's one thing to discern, first of all. But then when it comes to college, to just help kids understand some of the major things that are going to sway the cost of college. So in-state versus out-of-state. Show them, here's what this in-state school costs, here's what this out-of-state school costs. And then help them understand that, loans, it seems like funny money. They're easy to get. And that's one of the reasons why tuition keeps going up, because it's so easy to borrow money to pay those increasing tuition bills. But if we help our kids see, $5,000, $10,000, maybe that seems like such a large sum of money that they can't even get their mind around it. Help them get their mind around it by showing them, look, if this is the field you're thinking about going into, there's resources online where you can find out average starting salaries. Create a first year out of college budget with the kid and show them how a student loan payment will fit or not. If you're going to live generously, if you're going to save and invest adequately, if you're going to enjoy financial margin, it really doesn't fit. And so to help them see the reality of that would be a really helpful thing. And then we can start having conversations about, all right, what is affordable? How much are mom and dad willing to provide for this? How much have we planned to provide for this? How much are you potentially going to be on the hook for? And how is that going to happen? And if we can avoid debt in doing that, so much the better, because debt starting out in life after college is just it can be a very, very heavy burden.
Yeah. As we're seeing so many kids putting off marriage, having children, simply because financially, it's very hard for them to step into that adult life right after college with their first job with so much debt, being in tow. All right. Well, Matt, one more specific topic about borrowing, more on the other things. So as we're talking about how to avoid, obviously, debt, how would you guide parents, or how would you encourage parents to address this topic of borrowing and debt with their kids to help them understand the potential dangers that may come?
Yeah, it's really the opposite of investing. And so I think of the financial fan, I like to call it. So compounding working for you is the wind is at your back. Compounding working against you is debt, and that's the wind is in your face. And so show them some examples. I mean, it doesn't take that much money of debt, that much of a balance before it becomes alarming. I don't have the figures memorized here for this conversation, but in the book, there's some examples. But borrowing a relatively small amount of money, $5,000, if you never take on any more debt, you cap it at $5,000, and you make the minimum required payments on that debt, it's alarming how many years it will take you to get out from under debt. So show that to kids. Show them some examples of just how dangerous debt can be. And by the same token, this is the thing that might surprise some people. Now that you've scared your kids about the dangers of debt and just how long it could take you to get out of debt, I actually recommend that parents use the idea of an authorized user with your kids, so that when they're in, probably junior, senior, high school, freshman in college, I believe, it's my opinion, and people are certainly free to disagree with that, but I think that it would be wise to get kids set up as an authorized user on one of your cards. Now, I'm not here to talk people into using credit cards if they've decided not to, but I do believe that just like, people get into car accidents, that doesn't mean we shouldn't teach our kids how to drive. People get into trouble with debt, as I even did early in my life. But I think that doesn't mean that we shouldn't learn how to use credit cards responsibly. So in the book, I talk about the rules of the road for wise credit card use. I encourage, like I said, the use of an authorized user sort of process with one of your cards, so that kids can get used to using it while they're still under our roof and can learn some of those rules of the road.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you put that in the book, because I ascribe to the same belief you have, which is it's better to understand that credit cards are a real part of life. It's just what it is. You're not going to do away with it. It's going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And actually, electronic money will eventually become part of it someday. But ultimately, if we ignore that and say, no, I don't want my kids to borrow at all, get into debt, and we don't teach them how to navigate that by having them as an authorized signer on our account or our credit card account, and eventually, helping them to navigate and manage credit cards responsibly within a financial plan, then that's like leaving the door open for them to jump into that, which eventually they will, without any experience of how they should manage it. And this is where I felt like we were kind of thrust into that. My wife and I both took on credit cards before we were married, so came into marriage with debt. But, our parents had credit cards, so we thought, well, they have them, we'll have them. But they never talked about it. They never taught us how to use it. And unfortunately, we just borrowed it to the point where, like, financially, we're in a big, big trouble. And we had to suffer so much to get out of it. Like you said, it's so much harder to dig out of consumer debt, especially credit card debt that could be, 20, 30% high yearly interest rate. And you just want to spare your kids from that, but realize that you can't ignore it. And I so appreciate that you included that in the book, because I think, like anything else we need to teach our kids, we can't just ignore it and say, don't. You need to help them understand why they shouldn't. And I think that proactive approach is way more effective than just hoping they'll get it.
Yeah, I would rather them be really well trained, again, while they're under our roof. If they learn to only spend a pre-planned amount, if they've got $30 in their budget for clothing, they can charge $30. I want them to track the use of that money so that they know that that $30 is not available for spending. That's allocated to that bill when it comes due. I want them to pay that bill in full when it comes due. Mm-hmm. And if they can't do those three things, then no, I don't want them using credit cards.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I just so appreciate everything that you've included in this book. I think it is a very comprehensive, not just overview, but the details you use and the example you use are so powerful to help parents and equip parents to be able to really know how to navigate this area. It is something that we can, as parents, do. My wife and I did it with very little education. We had some of it we've done the wrong way, and then we've tweaked it and made it better. But we feel like just because we understood finances, it helped us to then understand how to pass it on to our kids. And more importantly, we understood the importance of passing it on to our kids. So I hope, if nothing else, that you'll receive that from today's or over the last 2 episodes, that it is your responsibility. It is something that you can get into, even if you're not an expert. You don't have to be. You love your kids. You know what's best for them. And it's teaching them these life lessons, these principles. That's more important than the actual practical step-by-step how to use money. You'll have the resources to do that. And Matt is a great resource for that, by the way. If you want Matt to come teach these principles at your church, he is passionate and he would love to do that and impart this to your marriage crowd. Just invite him to come and do that for you. And of course, you can learn more about what Matt does at mattaboutmoney.com. Matt, if you're open to it, I don't know if you are, but I'll throw it out there. If you're open to it, we can also share your contact information if someone wants to reach out to you. Is that okay? Or is that something?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
No, I would take every and any opportunity. I love this topic. I love spreading it to other parents and ultimately then through them to their kids. So absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, just so thankful for you, Matt, for doing this. And also, I'd also want to just encourage anyone that's listening out there to get familiar with Sound Mind Investing. This is a Christian company that can help you understand how to manage your money better. And they have some really great tools and even some one-on-one help that they can help you to get traction there, because it's not something that most of us are comfortable with or know how to do. And having an expert on your side, someone that can help you to do it, is going to make a big difference. You consistently see people who do use a financial planner or some kind of financial assistance in that area about investing do better than those that don't. So I just encourage you to reach out to Sound Mind Investing. Again, Matt can connect you with them as well, since that is his full-time gig, and he would love to help you understand this topic. And then, of course, you can pass that on to your kids as well. Well, Matt, thanks again for being with us. I so appreciate your time and your passion for this and for teaching our audience about how to teach their kids about money.
Thanks so much, Leo. I really enjoyed the conversation.
And I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. If it was helpful, if you found it valuable, would you do us a huge favor and share it with someone else, and maybe leave us a review? We would love to earn your 5-star review if we've done a good job here, so that more people can find this content and benefit from it. If you want to know more about CSN, Christian Stewardship Network, you can find us at christianstewardshipnetwork.com. We help leaders to equip their church on how to steward and give money according to God's will. That's really our passion, is to see a stewardship and generosity ministry implemented as a discipleship tool in every church. So if we can help you with that, we would love to be in your corner and help you to do that. So you can reach us on our website, and we can give you all those tools and connect with you and help you to do that. Again, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time on Stewardship Leader.